The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the void between star systems like a giant crystal flower. Its transparent walls caught the light from nearby stars and scattered it into rainbow patterns across the metal corridors inside. Ships from hundreds of different worlds docked at its many ports, bringing representatives from across the galaxy to the most important meeting place in known space. Elena Vasquez walked through the main corridor, her simple black diplomatic suit, making her look plain compared to the colorful robes and strange body shapes of the aliens around her. She carried a small briefcase and wore no jewelry except for a simple wedding ring. Her graying hair was pulled back in a neat bun. To anyone watching, she looked like an ordinary middle-aged woman heading to an ordinary business meeting. But Elena was not ordinary. She was humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, representing a species that most aliens saw as dangerous children who had somehow learned to travel between stars. Behind her, almost invisible in the shadows, walked a man in a dark suit. He was shorter than Elena, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and gray hair that was starting to thin on top. He looked like someone's grandfather, the type of man who might work in a library or teach mathematics to young students. His name was Marcus, and he never spoke unless Elena spoke to him first. The other aliens in the corridor barely noticed Marcus. Their eyes seemed to slide right past him, as if he was not really there. This was not an accident. Elena stopped at a large viewing window that looked out into space. The stars stretched endlessly in all directions, and she could see the blue glow of Earth's sun somewhere far in the distance. She had not been home in 2 years. "Nervous, Ambassador?" Marcus asked quietly. His voice was soft and gentle, like a grandfather reading bedtime stories. "Always," Elena replied, "but not about the meeting. I'm nervous about what comes after." Marcus nodded. He understood. Today's meeting was not really about trade routes or mining rights like the official agenda claimed. Today, the other species in the galaxy would try to decide what to do about humanity. They continued walking toward the council chamber, passing groups of aliens who whispered among themselves. Elena caught fragments of their conversations in the common galactic language. "The humans are here," hissed a snake-like creature with scales that changed color as it spoke. "I heard they destroyed 3 pirate fleets last month," buzzed an insect being with 4 arms and rainbow wings. "Impossible. They've only had space travel for 200 years, rumbled a rock creature whose voice sounded like an earthquake. Elena smiled slightly. The rumors about humanity were growing larger and stranger each day. Some were true, most were not. But all of them made the other species nervous. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. The walls were made of clear crystal that showed the stars beyond, making it feel like the meeting was taking place in open space. Representatives from over 300 species filled the seats, their various forms creating a bizarre rainbow of life. Elena took her assigned seat in the newest section, the area reserved for species that had joined the council in the last century. The seat next to her was empty, officially for her aide, though Marcus preferred to stand in the shadows near the wall. Across the chamber, she could see the delegation from the hegemony of Eschatar. They were large reptilian creatures with sharp teeth and scales that gleamed like armor. Their leader, Ambassador Kresh, had bright yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. He was staring directly at Elena with obvious dislike. The hegemony controlled over 50 star systems and had the largest military fleet in the galaxy. They had been the most vocal opponents of humanity's admission to the Council, arguing that humans were too violent and unpredictable to be trusted with interstellar politics. Near the center of the chamber sat the ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who appeared as shifting columns of colored light. They rarely spoke, but when they did, other species listened. They were the oldest members of the Council, with a civilization that stretched back millions of years. The Zephyrian delegation occupied a section decorated with flowing banners and wind chimes that made soft music in the chamber's artificial breeze. They were tall, graceful beings who looked almost like humans, except for their silver skin and the small wings folded along their backs. The Zephyrians were known for their art and philosophy, but they had little respect for what they saw as humanity's crude culture. Elena recognized representatives from dozens of other species. The crystalline Korthak, who communicated through changes in their body's light patterns. The aquatic depth dwellers who needed to stay in water-filled suits to survive in the chamber's atmosphere. The machine beings called the Constructed, who had uploaded their consciousness into robot bodies centuries ago. A deep tone rang through the chamber, signaling the start of the session. The current council president, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms called High Speaker Veltar, stood at the central platform. "Welcome, representatives of the Galactic Council," Veltar announced, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. "We gather today to discuss matters of trade, territory, and the continued peace of our shared galaxy." Elena listened as the first few agenda items were discussed. Mining rights in the Outer Rim, new trade routes through the Spiral Arm, disputes over terraforming rights on uninhabited worlds, standard diplomatic business that kept the galaxy running smoothly, but she could feel the tension building. Every few minutes, another representative would glance in her direction. Conversations would pause when she shifted in her seat. She was being watched, evaluated, judged. Finally, High Speaker Veltar reached the item Elena had been waiting for. Item 7. Review of new member integration and compliance with Galactic Accords, Veltar announced. The chair recognizes Ambassador Kresh of the Hegemony. Kresh stood and moved to the speaking platform with the smooth, predatory grace of a natural hunter. His yellow eyes swept the chamber before focusing on Elena. "Fellow council members," Kresh began, his voice carrying a slight hiss. "We face a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our peaceful galaxy. The species known as humanity has been granted membership in this council, but their actions since joining have been deeply troubling." Elena kept her expression neutral, though she could feel her heart rate increasing. Marcus, still standing, in the shadows, had not moved, but something about his posture had changed. He seemed more alert, more focused. "Humans claim to be peaceful explorers," Kresh continued, "but their history tells a different story. They are a species born from conflict, shaped by violence. Even now as we speak, human military vessels patrol the borders of their territory with weapons that violate several council treaties." This was not true, and Elena knew that Kresh knew it was not true. Human ships carried defensive weapons only, well within council guidelines, but truth had never been the point of these accusations. "Furthermore," Kresh said, his voice growing louder, "we have received reports that humans are conducting secret military research in their outer colonies. Research into weapons of mass destruction that could threaten every peaceful species in the galaxy." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Elena could see that some representatives were nodding along with Kresh's words. The Zephyrian delegation looked particularly concerned, their silver faces drawn with worry. "I call upon this council to take immediate action," Kresh declared. "Humanity must submit to immediate inspection of all their worlds and facilities. They must accept permanent monitors from council peacekeeping forces, and they must agree to limits on their military development and territorial expansion." Other words, Elena thought, they want to put humanity in a cage before we become too strong to control. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives turned to their advisors and allies. Elena could hear fragments of debate in dozens of languages. "The humans are dangerous," someone was saying, "but they've done nothing wrong," another voice argued. "Not yet," came the reply. High Speaker Veltar called for order, and gradually the noise died down. "The chair recognizes the representative of the ethereal collective," Veltar announced. One of the columns of light drifted to the speaking platform. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, like the whisper of wind through empty space. "We have observed the species called humanity for many cycles," the ethereal said. "They are indeed a species born from violence, shaped by conflict and struggle. Their entire evolutionary history is written in blood and conquest." Elena felt her stomach drop. If the ethereals were against humanity, the vote would not even be close. "However," the ethereal continued, "we have also observed their capacity for growth, for change, for sacrifice in service of others. They are dangerous, yes, but danger is not the same as evil. A sharp blade can cut, but it can also defend. Fire can burn, but it can also warm the cold and light the darkness." The chamber fell silent. Elena held her breath. "The ethereal collective will reserve judgment until we have heard from humanity's representative," the being of light concluded, then drifted back to its seat. High Speaker Veltar looked at Elena. "The chair recognizes Ambassador." Elena's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Yes, we are young compared to many of your species. Yes, we are still learning the ways of galactic civilization. But we offer something valuable in return. Our determination to protect what we believe in, our willingness to stand against darkness wherever we find it, and our absolute refusal to abandon those who cannot defend themselves." Some of the representatives were leaning forward now, listening more carefully. "The hegemony asks you to cage us because they fear what we might become," Elena said, her eyes finding Kresh across the chamber. "But I ask you to judge us not by what we might do, but by what we have done. In our short time among the stars, human ships have answered every distress call, defended every trade route, and stood guard against every threat to peaceful commerce." This was true, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Human vessels had gained a reputation for showing up wherever pirates or raiders were causing trouble. "We do not ask for special treatment," Elena concluded. "We ask only for the same rights and responsibilities as every other member of this council. The right to defend ourselves, the right to explore and grow, and the responsibility to protect the innocent and preserve the peace." She returned to her seat amid scattered applause from some sections of the chamber. But she could see that many representatives still looked unconvinced. The debate continued for another hour, with various species voicing their concerns and opinions. The Zephyrians worried about human cultural contamination. The Korthok questioned whether humanity was advanced enough for council membership. The Constructed noted that human technology was developing at an unprecedented and potentially dangerous rate. Finally, High Speaker Veltar called for a recess before the final vote. Elena walked out of the chamber and made her way to one of the observation decks. Marcus followed silently behind her. The deck was nearly empty, giving them privacy to talk. Elena stared out at the swirling colors of a nearby nebula, its gas clouds lit from within by newborn stars. "They're going to vote against us," she said quietly. Marcus stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back. "Perhaps," he said, "but that may not matter." Elena looked at him. "What do you mean?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars. "There are forces at work here beyond simple politics, Ambassador," he said finally. "The galaxy is changing. Old certainties are breaking down. The species in that chamber are afraid, but not just of humanity. They're afraid of what's coming." "And what's coming?" Elena asked. Marcus turned to look at her, and for just a moment Elena saw something in his kind eyes that made her shiver, something vast and patient and utterly without mercy. "Change," Marcus said simply, "whether they're ready for it or not." The recess tone sounded, calling them back to the chamber for the final vote. Elena straightened her jacket and prepared to face whatever came next. Behind her, Marcus smiled slightly and followed her back into the light, becoming invisible once again to all but the most careful observers. The vote was about to begin. but Elena had the strange feeling that it would not matter as much as everyone thought. Something else was coming to Nexus Prime, something that would change everything. She just didn't know what. The council chamber felt different when Elena returned from the recess. The air seemed thicker, charged with tension like the moments before a thunderstorm. Representatives huddled in small groups, whispering urgently among themselves. She could see alliances forming and breaking in real time as species calculated the political cost of supporting or opposing humanity. Elena took her seat and noticed that several delegations had moved closer to the hegemony section. The insect beings called the Hive Collective had repositioned their floating platforms. The gas-breathing void dwellers had shifted their containment suits to face Kresh's delegation. Even some species that Elena had thought were neutral were now clearly aligning against humanity. Marcus remained in the shadows, but Elena could sense his attention focusing on the chamber like a laser beam. He had been unusually quiet during the recess, spending most of the time staring out at the stars with an expression she couldn't read. High Speaker Veltar called the session back to order with 3 deep tones that echoed through the crystal chamber. "Before we proceed to the final vote," Veltar announced, "Ambassador Kresh has requested additional time to present new evidence." Elena's stomach clenched. This was not part of the normal procedure. New evidence at this stage meant that the hegemony had been planning something bigger than just a simple vote. Kresh stood and activated a holographic projector in the center of the chamber. 3-dimensional images appeared in the air above the speaking platform, showing star charts of human space. "Fellow council members," Kresh began, his yellow eyes gleaming with satisfaction, "what I am about to show you will prove that humanity poses an immediate threat to galactic peace." The first hologram showed the outer edge of human territory, where new colonies were being established on previously uninhabited worlds. Red markers appeared on several systems, pulsing like warning lights. "These are the locations where human military installations have been detected," Kresh announced. "Not the small defensive platforms they claim to have, but massive fortress worlds capable of launching attacks deep into council space." Elena knew this was a lie. The red markers showed mining operations and civilian research stations, not military bases. But the holographic display made them look threatening, and she could see that many representatives were believing what they saw. "Furthermore," Kresh continued, changing the display to show shipping routes, "human cargo vessels have been detected carrying materials that could only be used for weapons manufacturing. Rare metals, exotic energy sources, and biological samples that violate multiple council treaties." Again, this was false. The materials Kresh was talking about were standard supplies for terraforming operations and medical research, but presented this way, they looked like the components for weapons of mass destruction. The most damaging presentation came next. The hologram showed what appeared to be recordings from human military communications, with voices speaking in Earth. Languages about conquest and expansion and showing these aliens who's really in charge. Elena recognized the recordings immediately. They were from a popular entertainment program on Earth, a fictional drama about space wars. But taken out of context and presented as real military communications, they sounded exactly like proof of humanity's aggressive intentions. "This evidence was gathered by our intelligence services over the past 6 months," Kresh lied smoothly. "It shows clearly that humanity is preparing for war against the Council, using their membership as cover to position their forces for a massive attack." The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and angry chittering. Elena could see fear spreading through the assembled representatives like wildfire. Several delegations were already activating their emergency communication systems, probably calling home to warn their governments. High Speaker Veltar struggled to maintain order as accusations, and demands for immediate action filled the air. "The evidence is clear," shouted the representative of the crystal beings, her voice ringing like breaking glass. "Humanity must be stopped before they can attack. Exile them from council space. demanded a representative of the machine collective, his electronic voice crackling with artificial outrage. "Better yet, contain them permanently," hissed one of the void dwellers from inside his gas-filled suit. "Some species are too dangerous to be allowed freedom." Elena stood and tried to respond, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos. When she finally managed to get High Speaker Veltar's attention, the damage was already done. "The evidence you've seen is fabricated," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet chamber. "Those military communications are from an entertainment program. The cargo manifests are for civilian supplies. The installations are mining operations and research stations." "Of course you would say that," Kresh replied with a cold smile. "What else would a human spy claim when caught in the act?" Elena felt her temper rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. Losing control now would only prove their point about human aggression. "I invite any council member to inspect our facilities personally," she said. "Full access. No restrictions. You'll see that everything I'm telling you is true." "And give you time to hide your weapons?" Kresh laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "We are not fools, human." The ethereal collective's representative drifted forward, its column of light pulsing with what might have been concern. "The evidence is troubling," the being of light said, its voice echoing strangely. "But accusations require proof beyond manipulated recordings and suspicious interpretations." Elena felt a moment of hope, but Kresh was ready for this objection. "Then let us have immediate inspection rights," he declared. "Full access to all human worlds and facilities, with hegemony monitors to ensure compliance. If humanity is truly innocent, they should welcome such oversight." The trap was sprung perfectly. If Elena agreed to the inspections, humanity would be admitting guilt and accepting permanent occupation by hostile forces. If she refused, it would be seen as proof that they had something to hide. Elena looked around the chamber, seeing fear and suspicion on every alien face. These beings had been carefully prepared to believe the worst about humanity, and Kresh had given them exactly what they wanted to hear. "The Galactic Council demands an immediate response," High Speaker Veltar announced. "Will humanity submit to comprehensive inspection and monitoring, or will you confirm our suspicions by refusing?" Elena stood in the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of her species' future pressing down on her shoulders. 300 alien civilizations waited for her answer, many of them already convinced that humans were a threat that needed to be contained or eliminated. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. A soft, alert tone was sounding through the chamber's communication system, so quiet that most representatives hadn't noticed it yet. But Elena had spent enough time on space stations to recognize the sound. It was a proximity alarm. "High Speaker." Veltar noticed the sound a moment later and activated his communication panel. His blue face turned pale as he read the incoming message. "Unknown vessels detected approaching the station," he announced, his voice tight with concern. "Multiple ships, configuration unknown, refusing to respond to communication attempts." The chamber's main display activated, showing the external view from Nexus Prime's sensors. Against the backdrop of stars, Elena could see dark shapes moving toward the station. The ships were sleek and predatory, their hulls so black they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Elena's blood ran cold. She recognized those ships from intelligence briefings back on Earth. They belonged to the Void Syndicate, the most feared pirate organization in the galaxy. The Syndicate didn't attack diplomatic targets. They were raiders and terrorists who preyed on cargo ships and isolated colonies. But here they were, approaching the most heavily defended station in Council space. "This must be a mistake," High Speaker Veltar said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The Syndicate would never dare attack Nexus Prime." As if responding to his words, the approaching ships suddenly accelerated, their engines leaving trails of dark energy across the star. Field, weapon ports opened along their hulls, revealing the distinctive purple glow of Syndicate disruptor cannons. All representatives remain calm, Veltar announced, though his own voice was shaking. Station defenses are activating. We are perfectly safe. But Elena could see that the approaching fleet was larger than anything the Syndicate had ever assembled before. Dozens of ships, including several massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the largest council vessels. This wasn't a raid. It was an invasion. The first energy blasts struck Nexus Prime's outer shields, causing the entire station to shudder. Emergency lights activated throughout the chamber, bathing everything in red warning illumination. "This is impossible," gasped the representative of the crystal beings. "The Syndicate doesn't have the resources for an assault like this." More impacts shook the station. Through the crystal walls, Elena could see the outer defensive platforms firing back, their beams splashing harmlessly against the attackers. Advanced shields. The pirates had better technology than anyone had thought possible. Panic began to spread through the chamber as representatives realized that their supposedly safe meeting place was under serious attack. Some species delegates were already heading for the exits, seeking escape pods or private shuttles. Elena remained in her seat, watching the battle unfold outside. Something about this attack felt wrong. The timing was too perfect, coming right, when humanity was being accused of military aggression. The Syndicate fleet was too large and too well equipped for a normal pirate organization. She looked across the chamber at Kresh and saw something that confirmed her suspicions. The hegemony. Ambassador was not panicking like the others. He was watching the attack with calm interest, as if he had expected it. Elena turned to look for Marcus and found him standing directly behind her chair. When had he moved? She hadn't heard him approach, and she would have sworn he was still by the wall just moments before. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I think this attack isn't what it seems." "No," he agreed, his voice as calm as always. "It's not." Another massive impact shook the station, and Elena could hear the groaning of stressed metal somewhere in the superstructure. The station's shields were failing faster than they should have been. The pirates had found weaknesses that shouldn't have existed. The hegemony set this up, Elena realized. They're working with the Syndicate. This attack is meant to show that the Council can't protect itself, that stronger leadership is needed. Marcus nodded slowly. "And when the dust settles, Ambassador Kresh will propose that the hegemony take charge of Council security. With humanity branded as traitors, they'll have no opposition to military rule." Elena felt sick. The galaxy was about to be conquered, and humanity would be blamed for it. Every species would believe that human aggression had forced the hegemony to take extreme measures. The lights in the chamber flickered as another section of the station's defenses failed. Several representatives were now running for the exits, abandoning any pretense of dignity. The crystal beings were making sounds, like breaking wind chimes. The Void Dwellers were cycling their life support systems frantically. "Attention all representatives," High Speaker Veltar announced over the emergency communication system. "Prepare for immediate evacuation. This is not a drill." Elena stood and faced the chaos around her. In a few minutes, Nexus Prime would fall to the Syndicate attack. The Galactic Council would be scattered and broken. The hegemony would rise to power on the pretense of restoring order, unless someone stopped it. She turned to Marcus, who was watching the destruction with those kind, grandfatherly eyes. "Can you stop this?" she asked quietly. Marcus tilted his head slightly, considering the question. "The fleet outside? Yes, that would be simple enough. But the real question is whether you want me to reveal what I am to save beings who were ready to cage your species 5 minutes ago." Elena looked around the chamber at the panicking aliens. Many of them had been prepared to vote for humanity's subjugation or exile, but they were still innocent beings who didn't deserve to die for. Their leaders fear and prejudice. "They're afraid of us because they don't understand us," she said. "Maybe it's time they learned what humanity is really capable of." Marcus smiled, and for just a moment, Elena saw something vast and terrible behind his gentle expression. "Very well," he said, "but understand, Ambassador, that once they see what I am, there will be no going back. The galaxy will never look at humanity the same way again." Elena nodded. "Then let's give them something real to be afraid of." Marcus stepped forward into the light, and for the first time since entering the chamber, every alien eye turned to look at him. The quiet man in the dark suit, the grandfather figure who had been so easy to ignore. He adjusted his glasses and smiled at the assembled representatives. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," he said in his soft, kind voice, "please remain in your seats. I'll take care of this." Then Marcus walked toward the chamber's main exit, moving with the unhurried pace of someone taking a pleasant evening stroll. But as he walked, something about him began to change. The air around him seemed to grow colder. The emergency lights dimmed as he passed beneath them, and several of the most psychically sensitive species in the chamber began to scream. The screaming started with the ethereal collective representative. The being of pure light began to pulse rapidly, shifting from its normal blue glow to harsh red and white flashes. Its voice, usually so calm and ancient, became a high-pitched wail that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "What is that thing?" the ethereal shrieked, its light form writhing like it was in pain. "What walks among us?" The psychic species throughout the chamber began to react next. The mind-walkers, who could read thoughts across vast distances, collapsed in their floating chairs, clutching their heads and moaning. The dream-weavers, beings who lived partially in parallel dimensions, started phase-shifting uncontrollably, flickering in and out of visible reality. Elena watched in growing alarm as Marcus continued his calm walk toward the chamber's exit. The aliens around him were backing away, pressed against the walls and barriers as if he carried some invisible field of terror. But he still looked like nothing more than a kindly older man in a slightly rumpled suit. "Marcus," Elena called out. "What's happening to them?" He paused and turned back to her, his expression gentle and concerned behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "They're seeing what I really am, Ambassador," he said simply. "Most species can't perceive it directly, but those with psychic abilities can sense the truth." Another massive impact shook the station, this one stronger than before. Through the crystal walls, Elena could see that the Void Syndicate ships had moved into close attack formation. The station's outer defensive ring was completely gone now, reduced to glowing debris that drifted past the viewing ports. "Station integrity at 40%. Announced the emergency system in multiple languages. "All personnel prepare for hull breach. Repeat, prepare for hull breach." The chamber was in chaos now. Representatives from dozens of species were pushing toward the exits, trampling each other in their panic. The hegemony delegation, Elena noticed, was moving with suspicious calm toward what looked like a private escape route that had been prepared in advance. Ambassador Kresh caught her eye across the chamber and smiled coldly. Even with the station under attack, he looked satisfied. Everything was going according to his plan. "The Council will remember that humanity offered no help in our darkest hour," Kresh called out over the noise. "When order is restored, there will be a reckoning." Elena felt rage building in her chest. The hegemony had orchestrated this attack, put thousands of innocent beings in danger, and they were still trying to blame humanity for it. "Marcus," she said firmly, "stop this, all of it." Marcus nodded and adjusted his glasses one final time. "As you wish," he said. Then he simply walked through the chamber's main door, not opened it, not waited for it to slide aside. He walked through the solid metal barrier as if it wasn't there, leaving no hole or damage behind. The door remained perfectly intact, but Marcus was on the other side of it. The screaming stopped abruptly as the psychic species lost their direct perception of him. But the silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise had been. Elena activated her personal communicator and switched to the emergency channel that connected to the station's security systems. "This is Ambassador Vasquez," she announced. I'm tracking the location of my security detail. Can you show his position on the internal sensors? The response came back immediately from the station's AI system. No individual matching that description. Detected, Ambassador. Are you certain your security detail is aboard the station? Elena looked at the door Marcus had just walked through. According to the station's sensors, he didn't exist. Outside the chamber, the Void Syndicate attack was reaching its climax. The pirates had broken through the station's main defensive barriers and were beginning to cut into the outer hull with industrial-grade plasma torches. Elena could see armed figures in dark armor moving through the breached sections, heading for the station's core. The largest of the pirate ships, a massive dreadnought covered in weapon batteries, moved into position, directly above the council chamber. Its shadow fell across the crystal dome like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. High Speaker Veltar activated the chamber's main communication system. "Attention, Void Syndicate vessels," he broadcast, his voice shaking with fear and anger. "This is a diplomatic station under the protection of the Galactic Council. Your attack violates every treaty and law of civilized space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came back as harsh laughter from multiple voices. "The Galactic Council is finished, Blue Skin," snarled a voice that Elena recognized as belonging to War Chief Vextar, the Syndicate's most brutal leader. "Your precious democracy dies today. When we're done here, the galaxy will remember why the strong rule and the weak serve." Weapon ports opened along the dreadnought's underside, pointing directly down at the council chamber. Elena could see the purple glow of charging disruptor cannons, weapons powerful enough to vaporize everything inside the crystal dome. 10 seconds to firing," announced another pirate voice. "Hope you said your prayers, politicians." Elena closed her eyes and waited for the end. Around her, the remaining representatives huddled together or prayed to their various gods. Even Ambassador Kresh looked nervous now, perhaps realizing that his allies might not distinguish between him and the other council members when the shooting started. The 10 seconds passed. Nothing happened. Elena opened her eyes and looked up at the dreadnought. The weapon ports were still glowing, but no energy beams were firing. The massive ship hung motionless in space, as if it had been turned into a statue. "What's wrong with our guns?" demanded War Chief Vextar over the communication channel. "Why aren't we firing?" "I don't know, sir," came a confused reply. "The weapons are charged and targeted, but they won't respond to firing commands." "Then fire manually. Override the computers." "We're trying, sir, but nothing's working. It's like the weapons don't exist anymore." Through the crystal dome, Elena could see small figures moving on the dreadnought's hull. At first, she thought they were repair crew members trying to fix the malfunctioning weapons. But as she watched, she realized the figures were pirates in environmental suits, and they were running from something that was walking calmly across the ship's outer surface. Even at this distance, Elena could make out the familiar shape of a man in a dark suit strolling across the dreadnought's armored hull like he was taking a walk in a peaceful garden. He wasn't wearing a spacesuit. He didn't seem to need one. "There's someone on our hull!" screamed a pirate voice over the communications. "How did he get there? Where did he come from?" "Shoot him!" War Chief Vextar ordered. "We're trying. The weapons won't target him. They won't even acknowledge he's there." Elena watched Marcus approach a group of pirates who were firing their personal weapons at him. The energy beams and projectiles seemed to pass right through him without effect. When he reached the first pirate, he simply placed his hand on the being's shoulder. The pirate vanished, not exploded, not disintegrated, not thrown into space. Simply gone. As if he had never existed. His weapon clattered to the hull, but there was no body, no debris, no trace that a living being had been standing there moments before. Marcus moved to the next pirate and touched him gently on the arm. "Gone." The third pirate tried to run, but Marcus caught up to him easily. A brief touch, and another empty spacesuit drifted away from the hull. "What is that thing?" War Chief Vextar's voice had risen to a panicked shriek. "What's happening to my crew?" Marcus had reached the Dreadnought's main airlock. Instead of trying to force it open, he simply walked through the sealed barrier and disappeared inside the ship. The communications channel erupted with screams and confused shouts from inside the Dreadnought. "He's in engineering! How did he get past the blast doors? The security systems can't see him. He's not showing up on any sensors. Chief Morgan just disappeared. He was right next to me and then he was gone. Fall back to the bridge. Seal all the sections." Elena realized she was holding her breath. Around her, the surviving representatives were staring up at the Dreadnought in stunned silence. Even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had never seen anything like this. The screaming from the pirate ship gradually grew quieter as fewer and fewer voices remained on the communication channel. Whatever Marcus was doing inside the Dreadnought, he was being very thorough about it. "Bridge crew, respond!" War Chief Vextar's voice was barely recognizable now, high-pitched with terror. "Anyone respond! What's happening down there?" Silence. Then, impossibly, Marcus's gentle voice came over the communication channel. "Hello, War Chief," he said politely. "I'm afraid your crew is no longer available. But don't worry, you won't be alone for much longer." "What are you?" Vexatar screamed. "What do you want?" "I'm exactly what I appear to be," Marcus replied. "A security detail ensuring the safety of my charge, and what I want is for you to leave this place and never return. You can't stop all of us. I have an entire fleet." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "You do. For now." The communication channel went silent. Elena watched through the crystal dome as Marcus emerged from the Dreadnought's airlock, once again walking calmly across the hull. But now the massive warship was changing. Its lights were going out section by section, starting from the bow and moving toward the stern. Not the flickering of damaged systems, but the steady progression of something being systematically shut down. By the time Marcus reached the ship's stern, the entire Dreadnought was dark and lifeless. It hung in space like a dead thing, all of its terrible weapons silent forever. But Marcus wasn't finished. Elena watched in fascination and growing awe, as her quiet security details simply stepped off the Dreadnought's hull and began walking through open space toward the next pirate ship. He moved through the vacuum as easily as he had walked through the chamber door, his pace never changing, his posture relaxed and unhurried. The second ship tried to run. Its engines flared to life, and it began to accelerate away from the station. But Marcus was faster. He caught up to the fleeing vessel in seconds and placed his hand on its hull. The ship stopped moving, not slowed down, not turned around, simply stopped, as if it had encountered an invisible wall. Then, like the Dreadnought, its lights began going out. "This is impossible," whispered High Speaker Veltar, his blue face pale with shock. "No single being has this kind of power." Elena found herself smiling despite the situation. "You're right," she said. "No single being does have this kind of power." Veltar looked at her with confusion. "Then what is he?" Elena watched Marcus move to the third pirate ship, then the fourth. Each one fell silent at his touch, their crews simply ceasing to exist. "He's what happens when a human has nothing left to lose," she said quietly. "He's what we become when everything we cared about is taken away." The remaining pirate ships were trying to flee now, their engines straining as they attempted to escape whatever impossible force was hunting them. But they might as well have been trying to outrun their own shadows. Marcus moved between them like he was teleporting, appearing beside each ship just long enough to touch it and render it lifeless. Within 10 minutes, the entire Void Syndicate fleet was floating dark and silent around Nexus Prime. Dozens of ships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades, reduced to empty hulks by a quiet man in a rumpled suit. Marcus began walking back toward the station through the debris field. As he approached the crystal dome of the council chamber, Elena could see him clearly through the transparent wall. He looked exactly the same as when he had left. Neat gray, hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the patient expression of someone's favorite grandfather. He passed through the dome's crystal wall as easily as he had passed through the door, stepping back into the chamber like he had never left. The psychic species immediately began screaming again, but quieter this time, as if they were too exhausted for full panic. Marcus walked back to his position behind Elena's chair and adjusted his glasses. "The immediate threat has been neutralized, Ambassador," he reported in his soft, polite voice. "The station is secure." Elena stared at him. "Marcus, what did you do to those crews?" "I removed them," he said simply. "They were causing problems." "Removed them how? Where did they go?" Marcus considered this question for a moment, tilting his head like a professor trying to explain a complex concept to a student. "Nowhere," he said finally. "They simply aren't anymore. It's difficult to explain in terms that living beings would understand." The chamber had gone completely silent. 300 representatives from across the galaxy were staring at Marcus with expressions ranging from awe to terror to complete incomprehension. Ambassador Kresh, Elena noticed, had gone very pale. His yellow eyes were fixed on Marcus with the look of a predator that had suddenly realized it was actually prey. High Speaker Veltar found his voice first. "What are you?" he asked, echoing War Chief Vextar's last question. Marcus smiled kindly. "I'm Ambassador Vasquez's security detail," he said. "Nothing more, nothing less." "But the things you did?" Veltar continued. "The power you displayed. No known species has abilities like that." "No," Marcus agreed. "No known species does." Elena realized that everyone was waiting for her to explain. The revelation she had been dreading was finally here. The galaxy was about to learn humanity's greatest secret. She stood and faced the assembled representatives, many of whom were still cowering against the walls. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "I believe it's time you understood what humanity really is." Elena stood in the center of the council chamber, surrounded by the shocked faces of beings from across the galaxy. Outside the crystal dome, the lifeless hulks of the Void Syndicate fleet drifted in the starlight like ghost ships. The silence was so complete that she could hear the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Marcus remained behind her chair, hands clasped behind his back, looking for all the world like a patient butler waiting for instructions. But now, every alien eye in the chamber was fixed on him with a mixture of terror and fascination. "Before I explain," Elena said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal, "I want you all to understand something important. What you just witnessed was not an attack. It was not aggression. It was protection." She gestured toward the debris field outside. "Those ships came here to kill every being in this chamber. They came to destroy the Galactic Council and plunge our galaxy into chaos. Marcus stopped them because it was his job to keep me safe, and I was in this chamber with all of you." High Speaker Veltar found his voice, though it shook as he spoke. "Ambassador Vasquez, we demand an explanation. What is that being? What species does he represent?" Elena looked back at Marcus, who nodded slightly. "He's human," Elena said simply, "just like me." A wave of disbelieving gasps and chittering sounds swept through the chamber. "Impossible," declared the representative of the crystal beings, her voice ringing like broken glass. "No human could do what we just witnessed. No living being could do such things." Elena smiled sadly. "You're half right," she said. "No living being could do what Marcus just did." The chamber fell silent again, waiting for her to continue. "Marcus died 57 years ago," Elena explained. "He lost his wife, his children, and his grandchildren to a plague that swept through the outer colonies. He had nothing left to live for, nothing left to tie him to life. So he volunteered for a special program that humanity developed when we realized how dangerous the galaxy really was." She walked slowly around the speaking platform as she talked, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. "You see, we humans discovered something that apparently no other species has learned. Death is not always an ending. Sometimes, for those who have truly given up on life but still have something they want to protect, death becomes a tool." The ethereal collective's representative pulsed with confused colors. "You speak in riddles, human. Explain clearly what this being is." Elena stopped walking and faced the assembled delegates directly. "Marcus accepted death completely," she said. "He let go of every attachment to life, every hope for personal happiness, every fear of personal loss. When you have nothing left to lose, when you care about nothing except protecting others, you become something that the universe isn't quite sure how to classify." She gestured toward Marcus, who stood quietly listening to her explanation. "The universe recognizes life and it recognizes death, but it doesn't know what to do with beings who exist in the space between. Marcus is technically dead, but he's still here because he has a purpose. He's what we call one of the finished." Ambassador Kresh, who had remained silent since the attack ended, finally spoke up. His voice was hoarse with fear. "How many?" he asked. "How many of these finished does humanity have?" Elena turned to look at him directly. "That's an interesting question, Ambassador Kresh, especially coming from someone who just watched his carefully planned attack fail completely." Kresh's yellow eyes widened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do," Elena replied, calmly. "The Void Syndicate doesn't attack diplomatic stations. They're raiders and terrorists, not military forces. But somehow they assembled a fleet large enough to threaten Nexus Prime, and somehow they knew exactly where to strike to bypass the station's defenses." She walked toward the hegemony delegation, and Elena noticed that several of Kresh's guards were backing away from her. The timing was perfect, wasn't it? Right when you were trying to convince the Council that humanity was a threat, pirates conveniently attacked to prove how dangerous the galaxy had become. "How fortunate that you would be here to propose stronger military leadership when the crisis was over." Kresh's scaled face was turning darker with anger and fear. "You accuse me of treason without proof," he snarled. "The hegemony serves the cause of galactic peace." "Actually," Marcus said quietly from behind Elena, "I have proof." Every head in the chamber turned to look at him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small data storage device. War Chief Vextar was quite talkative before he stopped existing, Marcus explained in his gentle voice. He provided complete records of his communications with hegemony, military intelligence, including payment schedules and target priorities. He tossed the device to High Speaker Veltar, who caught it with one of his 4 hands. "You'll find everything there," Marcus continued. "Bank transfers, weapon shipments, even recordings of Ambassador Kresh's personal instructions to attack. During the council session." Kresh stood abruptly, his hand moving toward the weapon at his side. "You cannot prove anything," he shouted. "The word of a dead thing means nothing." Marcus tilted his head slightly, and Kresh's hand froze halfway to his weapon. The hegemony ambassador's yellow eyes went wide with terror as he found himself unable to move. "I would recommend against drawing a weapon in the council chamber," Marcus said politely. "It tends to create diplomatic incidents." Elena watched as Kresh struggled against whatever force was holding him in place. His guards were reaching for their own weapons, but they seemed to be having the same problem their leader was experiencing. "Let me be very clear about something," Elena announced to the chamber. "Marcus prevented an attack that would have killed everyone in this room. He saved your lives. But some of you are probably thinking that humanity has revealed a terrible weapon, something that threatens the balance of power in the galaxy. She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. You're right to be concerned, but not for the reasons you think. Elena activated her personal communicator and spoke into it clearly. This is Ambassador Vasquez to all human vessels in the Nexus Prime system. Please respond and identify your security status. The response came back immediately through the chambers. Communication system. Ambassador, this is Captain Chen aboard the diplomatic escort ship Endeavor. We show green across the board. Security detail confirms all assets in position and ready. Elena smiled at the confused faces around her. Captain Chen, how many finished do you have aboard your vessel? We carry a full diplomatic protection complement. Ma'am, 12 finished, currently in standby status. Elena switched channels. This is Ambassador Vasquez to the human colony ship New Hope, currently in the outer system. Please respond. Ambassador, this is Commander Rodriguez. New Hope reporting all green. We have 47 finished aboard as part of our standard colony protection package. Elena made one more call. This is Ambassador Vasquez to Earth Central. Command, priority communication. The response took a few seconds longer due to the distance, but when it came, the voice was crisp and professional. Ambassador, this is General Harrison. Earth Command reads you clearly. How can we assist? General, please provide current deployment numbers for finished personnel across all human operations. Classified information, Ambassador. Are you cleared to discuss this on an open channel? Elena looked around the chamber at the increasingly pale faces of the alien representatives. Yes, General? I think it's time for full disclosure. Understood. Current active deployment numbers are 47,832, finished across all military, diplomatic, exploration, and civilian protection services. An additional 12,000 volunteers are in training status. The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and frightened chittering. Nearly 60,000 beings who had accepted death and become something beyond the universe's normal rules. Thank you, General, Elena said. Vasquez out. She deactivated the communicator and faced the stunned assembly. Now you understand why I said you were right to be concerned, she said. Humanity has an army of the dead, beings who cannot be killed because they're already gone, who cannot be stopped because they have nothing left to lose, who cannot be reasoned with because they exist only to protect what they consider worth saving. Ambassador Kresh managed to find his voice, though he was still frozen in place. This is an abomination, he whispered. The dead should not walk among the living. The dead usually don't, Elena agreed. But humans are very good at refusing to accept the way things usually work. Marcus released whatever force had been holding Kresh, and the hegemony ambassador collapsed into his chair, breathing heavily. The finished are volunteers, Elena continued. People who have lost everything that made life worth living, but who still want to protect others from experiencing the same loss. They give up their existence to become guardians for the rest of us. The ethereal collective's representative pulsed with dim, confused colors. But why reveal this now? Why show us what you are capable of? Elena's expression became serious. Because you were about to make a terrible mistake. You were about to try to cage humanity out of fear. You were about to treat us as a threat that needed to be contained. She gestured toward the debris field outside. The Void Syndicate made the same mistake. They thought they could threaten people under human protection and face no consequences. They learned otherwise. Elena walked back to the speaking platform and stood at its center. Let me be absolutely clear about something. Humanity does not want to conquer the galaxy. We don't want to impose our will on other species. We don't even want to be the strongest military power in council space. She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. But we will not be caged. We will not be contained. We will not be limited or controlled or treated as a threat simply because you fear what we might become. And anyone who tries to harm the innocent under our protection will face the finished. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even the background hum of the life support systems seemed muted. "The Galactic Council has a choice to make," Elena continued. "You can accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic civilization, working together to build a better future for all species. Or you can continue to see us as a threat and try to limit our growth and freedom." She looked directly at Ambassador Kresh. "But understand that the second choice leads nowhere good for anyone. The Finished exist to protect what humanity values. Right now, what we value most is peaceful cooperation with our galactic neighbors. But if you make us choose between your comfort and our freedom..." Elena didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. High Speaker Veltar stood slowly, his 4 arms trembling slightly. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said formally, "the Galactic Council will need time to digest what we have learned today. I propose that we adjourn this session and reconvene when all members have had time to consult with their home governments." Elena nodded. "Of course, High Speaker. But before we adjourn, I want to make one thing clear to everyone here." She looked around the chamber one final time. "Marcus has been with me for 3 years. In that time, he has attended 47 diplomatic meetings, visited 19 different species' homeworlds, and been present at countless social and cultural events. Until today, none of you even noticed he existed." The implications of that statement sent a chill through the chamber. "The Finished are everywhere human diplomats go," Elena said quietly. "They're on our exploration ships, our trade vessels, our colony transports. They stand guard in our embassies and our research stations. And they're all invisible until they choose not to be." Elena picked up her briefcase and walked toward the chamber's exit. "The galaxy is safer than it has ever been," she said over her shoulder. "You just didn't know why." Marcus fell into step behind her, once again becoming the unremarkable man in the dark suit that everyone's eyes wanted to slide past. But now every alien in the chamber watched him with fascination and terror. Finally, understanding what had been walking among them all along, as they reached the door, Elena paused and turned back. "Oh, and Ambassador Kresh," she called out. The hegemony representative looked up with haunted yellow eyes. "The data that Marcus recovered from War Chief Vextar includes recordings of your personal communications with 17 other species representatives. It seems you've been planning this takeover for quite some time." Elena smiled pleasantly. "I'm sure the Council will find that information very interesting when they review it. Have a pleasant day." She walked out of the chamber, leaving behind 300 alien delegates who would never look at humanity the same way again. Behind her, Marcus adjusted his glasses and followed her into the corridor, humming softly to himself as if he had just finished helping his granddaughter with her homework, instead of single-handedly destroying the most feared pirate fleet in the galaxy. The age of innocence was over. The galaxy now knew what walked in humanity's shadow, and that changed everything. 3 weeks after the attack on Nexus Prime, Elena sat in her private office aboard the human diplomatic vessel Endeavor, reading reports from across the galaxy. The ship was docked at a refueling station in neutral space while she waited for the Galactic Council to reconvene. The reports made for interesting reading. The hegemony of Siskatar was in complete chaos. Ambassador Kresh had been arrested by his own government after the evidence of his conspiracy with the Void Syndicate became public. 17 other species had recalled their representatives pending investigations into their involvement with the planned takeover. The mighty hegemony military, once the largest fleet in the galaxy, was splitting into factions as different commanders chose different sides in the political upheaval. But more interesting were the reports of how other species were reacting to the revelation of the Finished. The Zephyrians had sent a formal diplomatic note requesting detailed information about human post-mortality resources and their potential applications in artistic endeavors. Apparently, the idea of beings who existed beyond death had captured their philosophical imagination, The crystal beings had submitted a scientific research proposal asking if they could study the finished to better understand the nature of consciousness and existence. They offered to share their most advanced crystalline computing technology in exchange. The Machine Collective had sent what might have been either a diplomatic inquiry or a business proposal, expressing interest in collaborative opportunities between post-biological entities and mechanically enhanced consciousness systems. Even more surprising were the requests for protection services. 17 different species had quietly contacted the human diplomatic corps asking about the possibility of hiring finished guardians for their own high-risk operations. Apparently, the idea of bodyguards who couldn't be killed was very appealing to beings who lived in dangerous parts of the galaxy. Elena was reviewing a particularly amusing request from a trade consortium that wanted to hire finished personnel to guard their cargo ships when her office door chimed. "Come in," she called. Marcus entered, carrying a cup of tea for her and a small datapad. He looked exactly the same as always, neat gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the patient expression of someone's favorite grandfather. But Elena knew that every being on the station was watching her ship nervously, wondering how many invisible guardians were walking their corridors. "Your afternoon tea, Ambassador," Marcus said, setting the cup on her desk. "And a priority message from Earth Central Command." Elena took the tea gratefully. "Thank you. What does Earth Command want?" "They're requesting an update on the galactic situation and recommendations for future policy," Marcus replied. "Apparently several member governments are asking questions about our deployment of finished personnel." Elena activated the data pad and read through the message. It was from General Harrison, the same officer who had provided the deployment numbers during the council session. "Ambassador Vasquez," the message began, "the revelation of the finished program has created significant interest among both human and alien populations. We're receiving volunteer applications at a rate of nearly 3,000 per day, mostly from individuals who have experienced personal tragedies and wish to serve as protectors." Elena paused in her reading. 3,000 applications per day. The number was staggering. "We're also receiving requests from alien governments for various forms of cooperation," the message continued. "Some want to hire our services. Others want to study our methods. A few are offering to share advanced technology in exchange for protection. The Political Affairs Division needs your assessment of which opportunities we should pursue," Elena set down the datapad and looked out the viewport at the stars. In just 3 weeks, humanity's position in the galaxy had completely changed. They were no longer the young, weak species that others could push around. They were now seen as powerful allies or dangerous enemies depending on how they chose to use their unique abilities. "Marcus," she said thoughtfully, "do you think we did the right thing, revealing what the finished really are?" Marcus considered the question carefully, as he always did. "The secret was never going to last forever," he said finally. "Too many of us are deployed across too many operations. Someone would have noticed eventually. Better that the revelation came on our terms, when we could control the circumstances." Elena nodded. "And the other finished? How are they handling the attention?" "Most are pleased that they no longer need to hide," Marcus replied. "It was tiring, always having to remain invisible, always pretending to be something we're not. Now we can simply do our jobs without deception." Elena's communicator chimed with an incoming message. She activated it and was surprised to see the face of High Speaker Veltar appear on the screen. "Ambassador Vasquez," the blue-skinned council leader said formally. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all, High Speaker," Elena replied. "How can I help you?" "The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's status," Veltar announced. "We would like to invite you to return to Nexus Prime for a special session tomorrow." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "What kind of decision?" Veltar's expression was unreadable. "That will be announced during the session. But I will say this. The vote was unanimous." The communication ended. leaving Elena staring at the blank screen. A unanimous vote could mean anything. It could mean that all species had agreed to accept humanity as an equal partner. Or it could mean that they had all agreed humanity was too dangerous to remain free. "Marcus," she said quietly, "how many finished are currently assigned to the Nexus Prime system?" 47 aboard various human vessels, Marcus replied immediately, plus myself, 48 total. "And if the Council has decided to try to contain or eliminate humanity?" Marcus's expression didn't change, but Elena sensed something shift in the air around him. "Then they will learn that such decisions have consequences," he said softly. The next day, Elena returned to the Council chamber aboard a human shuttle. As they approached Nexus Prime, she could see that the station had been repaired since the attack. New defensive platforms surrounded it, and additional security ships patrolled the area. But she also noticed something else. Human vessels were among the patrol ships, their crews working alongside Council forces. The chamber itself looked different when Elena entered. The seating had been rearranged, with humanity's section moved from the newest member area to a position of honor near the center. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the seats, but their expressions were very different from the fear and hostility she had seen 3 weeks ago. Many looked nervous, but it was the nervousness of beings meeting someone important, not the fear of confronting an enemy. Others looked curious, studying Elena and Marcus with obvious fascination. A few even looked hopeful. High Speaker Veltar called the session to order and stood at the central platform. "Fellow representatives," he began, "we gather today to address the changed circumstances of our galaxy and humanity's place within it." Elena braced herself for what was coming. 3 weeks ago, we witnessed capabilities that challenged our understanding of what was possible. We learned that humanity possesses resources that could reshape the balance of power in galactic civilization. Veltar paused, looking around the chamber. "We also learned that those resources have been used exclusively for protection and defense, never for conquest or aggression. The finished have walked among us for years, preventing conflicts, stopping pirate attacks, and ensuring the safety of innocent beings throughout Council space." Elena felt a glimmer of hope. "After extensive consultation with our home governments," Veltar continued, "the Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding humanity's future role in our civilization." The chamber fell completely silent. Effective immediately, humanity is granted full permanent membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges accorded to founding members. Elena felt relief flood through her. But Veltar wasn't finished. Furthermore, the Council formally requests that humanity accept the position of Galactic Security Coordinator with authority to deploy finished personnel throughout Council space for the protection of all member species. Elena's eyes widened. They weren't just accepting humanity as equals. They were asking humans to take responsibility for galactic security. The Council also establishes the Interspecies Cooperation Protocol, Veltar announced, a framework for sharing advanced technologies and resources between humanity and other member species. This includes joint research projects, cultural exchange, programs, and collaborative exploration initiatives. Elena stood and walked to the speaking platform, her mind reeling with the implications of what she had just heard. "High Speaker," she said carefully, "this is far more than humanity expected or requested. We're honored by the Council's trust, but we want to be certain that this decision is based on genuine cooperation, not fear." The ethereal collective's representative drifted forward, its column of light pulsing with warm, welcoming colors. "Ambassador Vasquez," the being of light said, "fear was indeed our initial reaction, but fear gave way to understanding, and understanding led to appreciation." The ethereal paused, its light shifting to deeper, more complex patterns. "For millions of years, the galaxy has known only 2 types of power: the power of advanced technology and the power of superior numbers. Humanity has introduced a third type, the power of absolute dedication to protecting others. Other representatives began to speak up from their seats. The crystal beings have calculated the statistical impact of human protection services, announced their delegate. Pirate attacks in sectors with human presence have decreased by 97%. The Zephyrian philosophical academies have declared the Finished to be the greatest example of selfless service in recorded galactic history, added the silver-skinned representative. Even the Machine Collective finds value in beings who have transcended the limitations of biological existence while retaining moral purpose, stated the robotic delegate in its electronic voice. Elena looked around the chamber in amazement. Instead of the fear and hostility she had expected, she was seeing respect, admiration, and genuine gratitude. Ambassador Kresch's replacement, a younger hegemony representative named Torval, stood from his seat. The hegemony government wishes to formally apologize for our previous leadership's actions, he announced. We request the opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to peaceful cooperation by offering our finest military vessels to serve under human security coordination. Elena realized that the galaxy had not just accepted humanity's power, they had embraced it. After millions of years of wondering who would protect them from the darkness between the stars, they had finally found their answer. The Council's offer is generous beyond words, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. But before humanity can accept such responsibility, you need to understand what you're asking. She walked to the center of the platform. The Finished exists to protect the innocent and preserve peace. If humanity accepts the role of Galactic Security Coordinator, we will protect every member species with the same dedication we show to our own people. But that protection comes with expectations. Elena's voice grew stronger. We will not tolerate aggression between council members. We will not allow the strong to prey upon the weak. We will not permit species to use their membership as a shield while they commit atrocities in the shadows. She looked directly at each delegation in turn. Peace is not merely the absence of war. It is the presence of justice, the protection of the innocent, and the guarantee that every being can live without fear. If humanity accepts this role, we will enforce that standard without exception and without favoritism. High Speaker Veltar smiled, the first genuine smile Elena had seen from him. Ambassador Vasquez, that is exactly what we were hoping you would say. The chamber erupted in applause, not the polite diplomatic clapping Elena was used to, but genuine enthusiasm from beings who had just heard someone promise to make the galaxy a safer place. Elena returned to her seat, where Marcus was waiting with a slight smile on his grandfatherly face. Well done, Ambassador, he said quietly, though I suspect our workload is about to increase significantly. Elena laughed. I suspect you're right. Think the other Finished are ready for galaxy-wide deployment? Marcus adjusted his glasses and looked out at the stars visible through the crystal dome. We've been ready for a long time, he said. We were just waiting for the living to realize they needed us. As the session continued with discussions of implementation timelines and resource allocation, Elena reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. Humanity had entered the council chamber as a suspect species facing possible containment. They were leaving as the guardians of galactic civilization. But perhaps most importantly, the Finished were no longer forced to hide in the shadows. They could stand openly as protectors, guardians, and the thin line between order and chaos. Outside the crystal dome, Elena could see human ships taking up positions alongside vessels from dozens of other species. The first joint patrols were already being organized. The first collaborative research projects were being planned. The first steps toward a truly united galactic civilization were being taken. And in the shadows, though no longer hidden, stood the Finished. 48,000 beings who had given up their lives to ensure that others could live theirs in peace. Marcus was right, Elena realized. The galaxy was safer than it had ever been. They just finally knew why. As the session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Elena noticed something that made her smile. Many of the alien delegates were making subtle attempts to get closer to Marcus, trying to get a better look at one of the legendary finished. Marcus, for his part, seemed to be enjoying the attention. He nodded politely to the beings who approached him, answered their respectful questions with his usual gentle courtesy, and even posed for a few photos.